This is the step where you go from having product ideas just floating around in your head to having a real product produced. Previously in this series, we showed you how to choose a product to sell based on our top criteria. We also showed you how to reach out to suppliers and order samples. Now is when you bring all of this together. You evaluate your samples to see which one is the best quality and matches your requirements, but you also consider the supplier and how quick their communication is, how thorough it is, and just overall how well you think you can work with that supplier. You select a supplier based off of all of these factors, and now you're ready to place your first order. This can be scary though, but trust me, it's a lot easier once you understand how to do it. I remember back when I placed my first order, I think it was around $2,000 to $3,000 at the time, which was a lot of money for me. And I remember it was terrifying. I had these wire details and I had to send this money to someone in China. I wasn't sure if this was a scam, if I was gonna lose my money, but it all was fine. And after repeating this process a number of times, you do get more and more comfortable with it because you ultimately understand and therefore trust the process. Now, I'm telling you all this just in case you're feeling that similar kind of fear. I want to let you know that it's a totally normal feeling. But as long as you've taken all the steps that we've outlined previously to verify your product opportunity, as well as follow the steps that I'm about to outline for you now in placing your first order, then you're going to be set up with the best chance of success. So to begin, let me give you some advice when it comes to negotiating a price with your supplier. However, keep in mind that this process will often take place before you decide on your final supplier. So usually you'll have your final prices when you make that decision earlier. Tip number 1, it's best if you have more than one supplier that you're willing to work with, because that way you can push a little bit harder on the price without worrying about losing them. Usually this will come from the top 3 suppliers list that you created earlier. Tip number 2, figure out what the maximum price is that you'd be willing to pay and be willing to walk away from if you're not satisfied with the price that they give you. And tip number 3, ask how many units you would need to order in order to get the lowest price that they can possibly offer. That way, if you can't get the price that you want right now, but you know that you can get that price later in the future when you place larger orders, then you should be okay with a slightly higher price to begin with, because you know that there's a path to get a lower price in the future. Once you've settled on a price, the next step is to create a purchase order and send it to your supplier. To make this easier for you, we actually have a sample purchase order agreement and template that you can fill out to generate your order. You can find this in the supplier tracker by clicking the purchase orders tab, where you can begin creating the order. First, fill out their contact information, then the billing and shipping address. Then, if you've been tracking quotes from this same supplier already, you can easily add that one in here, or you can just add in the quote details manually. Then I'd recommend coming down and adding some specific information into the agreements section. This helps you be super clear on what's expected by both parties. You can ask your supplier to sign this before placing your initial order. So first of all, make sure you include as many details as you can about your particular product. Every little detail that you can think of here is really helpful. You can never have too much detail here. Anything from what the tags look like, to color codes, to where your logo goes, or anything else. You can even include certain expectations around production time. One thing that we've done with our products here at Jungle Scout in the past is to add an agreed upon shipment date. And if the production time exceeds that, first up, they have to give you advance notification. And then secondly, if it's delayed by more than 7 days, you can start to enforce a 5% discount for every 7 days that the production's delayed. Now, not all suppliers are going to be comfortable with this, and the exact number of days and the discount amount doesn't necessarily matter. We've never actually had to enforce this, but the point here is more to hold your suppliers accountable, and creating something like this is definitely going to keep them more motivated to make sure that they get your goods out on time. Now, in this section, you can also include any inspection details if you're utilizing a third-party inspection service, which we're going to talk about briefly. You can also add packaging and labeling requirements, and also a confidentiality clause, which basically says, hey, you're not allowed to share with anyone else that I'm purchasing this product from you and what price I'm getting it for. And then lastly, you want to have your cost information in here as well. The typical payment terms that you can expect are either 30% upfront and then 70% once your order ships. Another common payment term that some suppliers use is 50% upfront and then the other 50% after your order ships. So I'd suggest first asking your supplier for 30% upfront, and then if they're not comfortable with that, then you would sort of fall back and see if they'd be happy with 50% upfront. Now, especially when placing your first order with a new supplier, one thing that you might want to do is to run an inspection. This will help ensure the quality of your product and protect you from receiving unsellable inventory. Now, while a lot of people choose to do an inspection, this is technically an optional step. You do just have to balance the risk versus reward, but in my opinion, I do think it's worth it to do it anyway. How it works is you pay a third-party company. Two popular ones are called Kima and VTrust, and they'll send out a representative to your factory. They can check for specific things that you ask them to look for, but they'll also have their own list of standard checks to go through. Now, even if you got a great sample from your supplier, you still want to ensure that your first order lives up to the same standard. And while inspections are relatively cheap, if you don't have enough money to pay for one, you can also run a sort of no budget inspection. This is essentially where you just ask your supplier to send you pictures throughout the process or video chat with you so that you can see the products for yourself. So for example, you may notice that your supplier is using the wrong label or maybe something else that you notice is a little bit off, but doing this will allow you to bring up this mistake so that it can get fixed before it's too late. Additionally, you can even include this in your agreement within the purchase order like I mentioned earlier. Something we've done in the past here is also added a section that states that the shipment must pass the inspection, and if it doesn't, then the supplier needs to fix the problem and then pay for a new inspection until it passes. This is another great way to hold your supplier accountable for creating high quality products. Now that you've placed your first order, you'll need to know how to ship your product into Amazon. This requires you to create a shipping plan inside of your Seller Central account, so make sure to watch this next video where I'm gonna walk you through the entire process and how to avoid the common mistakes that most beginners make. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Another common payment term that why can I not say this?